Hi, welcome to Sacred Intelligence. I'm your host, Dr. Terrellyn Curry Avery. My co-host, Susan Bainbridge, isn't able to be here with us this week, but she will return to our next show. I want to talk with you a little bit before I introduce my guest and just reiterate what sacred intelligence is. Sacred intelligence is our ability to tap into the sacred part of us to make intelligent choices. And when we're able to do that, we're able to manifest our own greatness and we're able to see the humanity in other people. One of the reasons why we want to learn how to maximize our sacred intelligence is because then it will help us to develop better relationships. Healthier relationships. First, we start with developing a healthy relationship with the sacred, which is really being able to be in tune with that divine part of us that guides us and helps us to make really good choices in life. It centers us, grounds us in this quiet and calming place. Once we develop that relationship, it then helps us to develop a better relationship with ourselves because we know that we're created out of divine goodness and divine love. So it helps us to learn to be more confident in who we are. And as a result, if we're more confident in who we are, we're better able to share our gifts with other people and develop relationships as a result of that. And when I speak of relationships, I really mean all sorts of relationships, not just those intimate relationships that we have with our partners or with our children, but the people that we work with, the people that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, whether it be in the street, in the supermarket, on the highways, just developing better relationships in general. So what we hope to do with this show, as I said to you on the last episode, is to teach you how to tap into your sacred source so that you just make better decisions. And we're going to have lots of guests on who will provide us with tools for how you tap into your sacred intelligence. How do you tap into that source? And they'll be providing their expertise. They'll be providing, like our guest today, will be providing a lot about her life story to give you examples of how we tap into that sacred intelligence. But before we get to our guest, again, one of the other things I want to do is I like to start the show out about talking about some of the current things that are happening in our world. And today, and this month, we are actually in Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And it's very important that we take a moment just to talk about domestic violence. It's also known as intimate partner violence. But I want to share with you just a few of the statistics to make you aware of them. And on average, nearly 20 people per minute are victims of physical violence by an intimate partner in the United States. That's astounding statistics. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men, because we don't want to forget that men are also abused as well. But 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner within a lifetime. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 7 men have experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 8 teen men have experienced stalking victimization during their lifetime. And on a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide. Astounding figures. And so we want to call attention to that. That's what a Domestic Violence Awareness Month is about, is calling attention to this particular issue and knowing how to get help, where to go, and how we can help other people as well. But I want to tell you a few other things about people who experience domestic violence. There are some physical and mental effects of domestic violence I believe you should be aware of. Women who suffer from intimate partner violence have an increased vulnerability to HIV and other STDs due to forced intercourse. And then there's studies that suggest that there's a relationship between intimate partner violence and depression and suicide. And it's estimated that half of the women in abusive relationships in the United States are physically injured by their partners. We're talking some very, very serious circumstances. And so we encourage you that if you are involved in a relationship that's physically violent, it is time for you to move forward and get help, get the help that you need so that you can move forward. And there, we will tell you at the end of the show how you can get some help for that. I also want you to know that there are dire economic effects as well for victims of domestic violence. 8 million days of paid work each year are missed because of women and men who experience domestic violence. The cost of intimate partner violence exceeds $8.3 billion per year. And then between 21 and 60% of victims of intimate partner violence lose their jobs as a result of domestic violence. And so between 2003 and 2008, 142 women were murdered in their workplace. So we're not just talking about at home or somewhere else. We're talking about people who were murdered where they work. So this is a very serious issue. It's something that we all need to be involved in, helping women and men who are in those circumstances to find a way out and to find a way to start over again. So our show this week is really not about domestic violence overall, but it's really about how do we start over? Because one of the issues that happens with people who are in relationships that are abusive, whether it be physically, mentally, sexually, or the like, one of the things that happens is women in particular, because I've done a lot of work with women, are fearful about starting over. They are frightened of what the unknown is. And so today, we want to spend some time talking with our guest about starting over. And not just simply starting over when you're involved in domestic violence situations, but starting over in life when difficult situations happen, because we all have things to happen in life where we have to pick up the pieces and learn how to keep moving. So today we are joined by Marilyn Dayton. She is my guest today, and she has some wonderful experiences that she's going to discuss with us, and maybe some that are not so wonderful. But I do want to introduce Marilyn to you. She began her career at the age of 12 as a radio quiz kid, and she pitched a talk show host for teens. And I think that's really relevant because we know that our teens need a lot of encouragement and guidance. And at 12, she was already starting a program for teens. And she's been in the front of the camera for a very, very long time. She was a fashion model, a radio and TV show hostess, program producer. Marilyn, though, has owned her own business. So for the past 30 years, she's been a newspaper reporter, creative writer, director, entrepreneur, you name it. But now Marilyn owns her business called Marketing Biz Professionals, where she actually helps other individuals learn how to market their business. And she's very, very focused on helping them to feel empowered, training them and coaching them in terms of how to make the most of their business. So she's an all-around woman. She's also the host of From This Corner TV, which also airs on MetroCast as well. So she's not new to the TV set. She's just sitting on the other side today. So we're going to hear a lot about Marilyn and her story and starting over. So Marilyn, welcome to the show. I'm so excited that you're here with me today.
Me too. Thank you very much for inviting me. And then, of course, because I've got a TV show, I invited her on mine. Mm-hmm. So, that's kind of how it goes, especially when you have a story to tell. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to all of these statistics. And because I've been involved with Safe Futures, mm-hmm. Our local organization that help abused women, men, and children. We can't forget about the children too. Right. And actually animals mm-hmm. are also caught up in the abuse situation. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's kind of near and dear to my heart because of my own situation. Mm-hmm. And, I started feeling kind of sad. And it takes a lot to make me feel sad. Mm-hmm. Mainly because I was relating to what you were talking about, and the different, we all have obstacles in life. Mm-hmm. We all face changes. Mm-hmm. And because we're human beings, we react emotionally first and foremost, and we can't think straight. And sometimes, depending upon the situation, it takes us longer before we can think straight and rational enough to be able to say, okay, all right, so it is what it is. What do I do about it now? But it's harder when you've been abused because you've been beaten. And it's harder to climb back up from a beaten, cowering attitude to standing up straight and feeling good about yourself and saying, I can do this, I can fix my life. And so I was relating to everything that you were saying, and it was like...
And I know, and that's one of the things that I really want to talk with you about, really the psychology part of how do you get back up and how do you fix your life after you've been beaten and battered not just physically, but psychologically, because it makes your self-esteem this little. And so you feel like you can't live without that person in your life. What am I going to do? You start thinking about what are going to be my financial resources in this situation, who's going to help me, who's going to support me. So before you get into your discussion about leaving one of your husbands who was abusive, I want to talk about just in general this idea of starting over. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I know when I read your bio, you mentioned that you grew up as a very shy child, which is really interesting that you were shy because you ended up being a model.
Yeah, I was shy and quiet. I was an observer. And my parents always told me I was born mature. Well, I don't know if that was true or not, but I was not a kid. I was not your typical kid. I was very serious, and I was perceived as shy because I was so serious and watching people all the time. I've always been like a sponge. I love to learn, and at the age of almost 70, I'm still learning all the time. I love it, and I'm never going to stop. But yeah, I was. When I don't know if our viewers remember the good old days of the radio quiz kids. It was kind of, well, it was before the Mickey Mouse Club, okay, but there were some of us who, I helped my older brother study, so I knew all the answers, and I was very quick with my reflexes so I could hit the button. We had, buttons to hit, and when we knew the answer, and sometimes halfway through the question, you kind of know where they were going. You go, B, and then they'd finish the question, and so I was just always winning because I had all the answers.
So you already knew that you were smart.
Well, they're smart and then they're smart. My brother was smart. He could remember things. He never studied. He didn't know how to study because he had this almost photographic memory, and which failed him in college, his first try at college, because he didn't know how to study. He had to learn everything, a different way. But he always had to be quizzed, before, because he'd be paying attention in class and not study. So I'd be his quiz master, And so I paid attention and I learned.
So that means that you still were smart.
Because
you're giving your brother credit for being smart, but what I want you to do is to give yourself credit for being smart too.
I own the fact that I'm smart.
Own your smartness. That's what I want you to do. And so, because what I'm thinking about is that, you grew up in front of the camera, you grew up helping him, so that must have given you a strong sense of who you were to some degree, even though you were shy.
I've always helped people. Stories are when I was a kid, anybody in the family, and we had an open door policy, we all lived in the same town, or some of us lived in the next town, and we'd all get together every Sunday. It was family day, and but our door was always open, and we had relatives come in and they'd sit down and talk with me about their problems. And I was a good listener because I was silent. And they would solve their own problems, but they thought I was helping them. I'd ask them key questions. I don't know, maybe I was born mature. I don't know. But I've always helped people. It's just been kind of my nature. And when you are looking for help, it's very difficult when you're used to being the helper.
Well, I think part of the issue is that we don't want to ask for help. And we want to seem like we're strong. And one of the issues, I think, as women, we're always taught to help other people. We're always taught to be the nurturers, which is why it's difficult when we're in a situation, let's say if we're in a marital situation or partner relationship that is not going well. We stay in the relationship for a little bit longer because what will they do without us? How will they manage?
That's part of it, yep, that's part of it. And there's also the fear factor. Because generally speaking, when you get married, everything comes together, your money, your resources, the thing that you purchase. And so there's a togetherness that is outside of your emotions and your personal emotional relationship, which is the financial relationship, and you're tied together. And so when you're thinking, this isn't, I don't know if this is supposed to be happening or what did I do wrong, that's always there. What did I do wrong? And you try to fix it all the time, which means you get out of who you are. You become somebody other than who you are by trying to model yourself into this person that won't get hit, that won't get yelled at, that won't cause him to get mad.
And so really what you're doing is you're taking ownership for their behavior instead of saying they're making the choice to do this. You're saying, I made this person mad, I made them hit me. And a part of what we do when we work with women who are in abusive relationships is really teaching them how to be, to find themselves more worthy. That you don't deserve to be hit. You didn't do anything. This person is the one who has the problem, not you. But we do have to work on what keeps you in that relationship. That's important to kind of figure out, why are you blaming yourself?
Exactly.
What have your life experiences been that keeps you there, right? And so we do a lot of work around helping them to kind of reframe their thinking, helping them to build up their self-esteem, and knowing that they were created out of goodness and love and they don't deserve to be hit.
Exactly, and that's tough to think of yourself that way when every day you are being told exactly the opposite.
Right.
And my own personal experience was, it was very tough because it was my second marriage. My children were living with us and he was their stepfather. And he just decided to take over everything as far as training the kids, disciplining the kids. And I'm kind of like standing there going, I don't know if this makes good sense, because he'd become like a drill sergeant. And so I was trying to figure out what the devil, what do I do about this? And while you're thinking about it, things are happening, and they're happening to your children. But you're so emotionally wrapped up in it, it's hard to think straight. And I was the main earner in the family. I owned an ad agency, and it was a very successful agency. And so I was paying all the bills, and he did manage to, and it was my own choice to do so, and we all go, oh, that was stupid. And it was. He wanted to become involved in my business, and he wanted to become vice president of finance. Oh, that was a mistake. But anyway, and I didn't know how to say no, because I thought if I say no, he's going to throw something at me, and I got to do the ducking situation again. And I was doing enough of that. So I said, okay, fine, whatever you want to do. Make him feel useful, maybe he will change. So that when I finally made the decision to end the relationship, kick him out actually really did a good one before.
So I want to talk about that
Yeah.
kicking out piece, because I've heard the story before of you kicking him out. But before I ask you about what was your decision to leave, and I know what that was, why did you stay for as long as you stayed? Because you just referenced you had been married before. So clearly you knew about starting over, and you had left someone who wasn't good for you.
Yeah.
So you knew about starting over, and you knew that you could do it because you had done it before. What kept you in this relationship for as long as you stayed in it?
Well, as short as I stayed in it, actually, is the way it is. We were only together about a year before I got smart. I wanted to give it enough time. When I commit to something, I commit totally, completely beyond what I really need to commit to it, and sometimes hurt myself in the process. So I was committed to make this work. And through my stubbornness and my fear factor, I guess you could say, I didn't want to change anything until I had a plan.
Yes.
Because I'm somebody that needs a plan to fall back on, or I'm not a spontaneous person. I have to think it through totally and completely. And I needed the time to do that.
But I think it's interesting that you are saying you needed the time to do that when you were in a dangerous situation, because I think there's some situations that cause us to say, I don't have time to figure out my plan in terms of what's going to happen next. I need to just get out and then figure it out after that. I mean, if you are in a dangerous situation where someone is throwing things at you and then you don't know when it's going to escalate and they're going to end up punching you and threatening to kill you and all of those things, the time to get out is in. Now, I know that it isn't easy, and so I'm just kind of tapping into you saying, well, listen, I needed a plan. I needed to figure out. And one of the things that we teach women in particular, because I work with a lot of women, so I apologize to any men out there who are watching this. I do know it's important for you to have a plan as well. We teach people to have a safety plan. Mm-hmm. You need to have a safety plan, and you need to share it with someone else. But that's not the sort of thing that you can be very strategic about, like, well, I got to have a 5-year plan, a long-term goal. No, you got to have a plan to say, I got to get out of here as soon as I possibly can. So for you, though, a part of staying in it for such a long time was, that analytical self, that structured self that says, this is the way I have to do this. But I wonder, Marilyn, could you also tell me, and we are going to get to what happened when you finally decided to leave, but how much does society's views of you staying in a marital situation, how much did that impact you, especially because you had been married before? Because I hear some people say, well, I don't want my marriage to fail. Exactly. And so they stay in it, and I will say to them, is your marriage a success now? Just because you have the paper and you're together, is your marriage a success? So how much of that impacted your decision?
Does. That external factor, definitely. I tried to talk to my mother about it, and she said, well, you know what I say. I said it in your first marriage. You got to stick by your man. I'm going, oh, God, that's not what I wanted to hear.
And like the Loretta Lynn song, Stand By Your Man?
Stand By Your Man, yeah,
it shows
exactly.
Our age to say that,
well,
but we know.
But and today there are still people that feel that way. I want you to learn from me, not do as I did, okay? Mm-hmm. Learn from my mistakes, because I made mistakes. We all made mistakes. The mistakes I made some big ones. I was afraid. I was afraid he was going to hurt us. That was a factor, too.
Sure, and that's real.
Once I realized, okay, we have a potential really bad problem here, I've got to be really careful, which then led me to think I've got to be careful and be thinking and planning at the same time.
Sure.
And being careful doesn't help at all, because they're going to get mad. They're going to get mad no matter what. It could be the weather set them off. And you just don't know what's going to set them off.
And what you're really saying is the unpredictability.
Very.
So that if you are staying because you're worried that it's going to create a worse situation, it's going to be bad no matter what.
It's going to be bad.
And the truth of the matter is, the reality is you could leave and it could lead to death. We can't deny that, right? And so you're making a choice. So whether you stay in the relationship or whether you leave it, you really are making a choice to say, do I stay in it and experience this every single day and still end up dying, or do I leave? And that's a difficult choice for people to make.
It is. It's very difficult.
But tell us about when you finally decided to leave. What prompted you to leave him?
Well, there are actually 3 things. I asked him if we could sit down with our minister and his wife and try to work through what wasn't working. And that took some work. But we finally did. And this man that I was married to at the time, he's sitting there telling our minister that it's all his parents' fault and he should have killed him when he had a chance. And I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm not going to say the word I'm thinking of, but dummy head, okay? This is a big hint that that you really, you're not going to be able to fix this. And my minister and his wife got really, really concerned because then he got up and he left. And I'm sitting there and they looked at me and they said, we've got to help you take care of this. And I said, it's my house. I don't want to get up and leave my house. He has no right. I was getting really mad. And that was overcoming the fears, okay? Then he did get violent. He got mad because I asked our minister and his wife to intervene. So he ended up attacking me and injuring me, and I ended up being in the hospital for a week. And I came home and I was all stitched up, right down the middle. I was all stitched up and recovering. And because he couldn't hurt me, because I'd just gotten home from the hospital, I mean, that got into his head. He turned to my daughter, who was 11 or 12 at the time, and he started yelling at her and shaking her. And all of a sudden, I got so pissed. I yelled at him. When I yelled, I don't yell, I yell, you know. And I said, let her go. I put my arm in and pushed her away. And I said, you have no right to touch her. You have no right to touch me. I want you out of here now. And I floored him. Mm-hmm. And
boy, so you see what anger can do? That mama bear came out and she knocked him out. Now, what you all can't see is she's really not that tall of a woman. So for her to knock him out, that was some severe force. And what dawns on me when I hear you tell that story is this, is that even when we don't leave for ourselves sometimes, if you touch my child, it's on.
Absolutely.
I'm ready to take you out. Now, we do know that not every woman feels that way. We know that some people still stay in relationships because they then worry, well, what are you going to do with my child if I leave? Or some people feel like they don't have the defenses to protect their children because they're so beaten and battered. But there's help for those women, you know, as well. But for you, it's just like, okay, you can do whatever you're going to do to me, and I can take it, but don't touch my child. But the thing that we miss out on in that piece is this. Just because he wasn't hurting your children physically, psychologically he was doing some damage.
Yes.
And so then we have to think about that because we know that cycles can repeat themselves, right? What kids see when they're younger, they can grow up and repeat those cycles.
That's how they learn. Mm-hmm. That's how they learn to handle life. They watch their family.
Sure.
And it's not always a good lesson. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is, now my first husband and I did not have a good relationship because he always thought it was my fault. And I mean, because I ended the marriage. Even though my kids still to this day say, I look at Dad and I look at you, and it just doesn't compute. You're completely, how did you ever get together and have us? I said, well, it was a reason. But anyway. Once I had made that decision and told him he couldn't touch my daughter and then he couldn't touch me, I took control. Mm-hmm. I took control of my life, I took control of my children's life, and I took control of the situation and handled it. I got the police involved, and the man disappeared. Of course, he also disappeared with all of the money from my ad agency, you know, which was not fun either. So
I want you to talk about that for a bit, because a part of the reason why, yes, I'm just pulling out all the stuff, right? Well, you told me you were an open book, so you know. But here's one of the issues. We worry about what will happen to us financially. I can't tell you the number of people that I've worked with when they've considered divorce and unhappy marriages for whatever reason, but they can't leave because finances are a real issue. You know, how will you support yourself? How will you support your children? Health insurance is a huge issue. So what are you going to do? You know, the fears are there. So talk to me a little bit about, how did you start over? How did you pick up? Because this man ran off with all your money, you know.
Yes, and ruined my business, okay. I had 16 full-time people, 9 part-time people. It was a big agency. And another part of me, going back just a second, to people knew I was married, okay? And I had an image that I had to maintain in the business world. And everybody in that city knew me. Well, you know, most people in the business world knew me. I mean, I was a columnist for the local business magazine. I was very involved in the community. People knew who I was. For me to look at them and say I failed in a marriage, you know, that's also a part of it. So I wanted to make sure I touched on that. So, okay, so kicked him out. He was gone. Changed the locks on my house.
Now, excuse me, just for
Yes.
1 second, because I want to make this clear from your story. Because when you knocked him out, you also called the police.
Oh,
and I think
yeah.
that's really, really important to say. Call the police right away.
Absolutely, right away, before he could get off the floor.
Yes.
Because he was not totally unconscious, but he was like in a daze and in shock. And I went, okay, grab the phone. So I grabbed the phone right away and called the police. And I said, I need your help. I have a domestic violence situation here. I have an 11 or 12-year-old daughter who's in harm's way. And that brought him a lot quicker than anything else.
And so I think what you're saying is very important, the language that we also use in order to get them out.
Because you don't want to leave yourself open to that person getting off the floor and then injuring you. And for that person to hear you on the phone saying what the situation is, and then knowing that they're going to be here quickly because of a child. A child in danger, it goes way up the line over anything else. And I don't know if that's still the same way. I would imagine it still is.
I would imagine so,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
So back to what you were saying.
okay, back to my business. Okay, so 2 days later, I learned that the money was gone. He was gone, the money was gone. And I'm talking about a lot of money. 6 figures, almost 7 figures. So I had to figure out, I didn't have time to think about anything but taking care of my, you know, protecting my family, protecting my business, which now, of course, was ruined. So I found jobs for every single one of my people. I had to find a job for me.
Sure.
And I had to talk to my attorney about what do I do now, and he said, well, sounds like bankruptcy time to me because I don't know if we can find him. And I'm sure the money's gone. So, and I had 18 properties that I had invested in. I was a landlady.
Wow.
That's
I hope you were a good
story.
one.
Oh, I was a good landlady. I hated it though. But anyway, so I had to sell off all my properties. I mean, I basically talk about financial problems. I was starting over completely. And I didn't want to lose my children to their father, which was another issue.
So you're really talking about some complex things here.
A few
when,
things,
when you're
yes.
starting over, you're dealing with the financial piece, you're dealing with losing your children, which to, you know, a mother who wants to be involved in her children's life, that's devastating, and you're panicky. And what I'm sitting here wondering about, what were some of the psychological things that you were going through at that time? And did you go and get help from a therapist or someone to help you weed through this? Because when you're picking yourself up from the bottom, this happy Marilyn that I see all the time could not have been around all the time. There must have been moments of sadness and depression and can I do this? And, you know, wanting to kill him still.
I was scared to death, and yeah, probably even today, I still want to shoot that guy right between the eyes. But I'm not going to do it. But, and it was my choice. Buck stops here. I made the choice to get involved with this man, although he was a chameleon. He was very, very good at that. He could have been an actor. I didn't know what he was like until it was too late. But it wasn't too late. That's the thing. You know, we've got to think, okay, this is not working. Change things. Make a change and start over. I was scared, but I've started over so many times in my life that I knew I could do it. I had to go back to my inner strength, which was tough to find.
Well, and I think that inner strength is really the sacred part of you as well.
Exactly.
And that belief that there's a divine presence out here that's helping you to find that within yourselves, any of us within ourselves, because I think that if we keep focusing on that negative experience that happened to us, sure, it's bad, it hurts, it's painful, but we'll stay stuck in that place. But the moment we can say to ourselves, let me step back, let me find who I was created to be, and let that goodness come out, I think that we can move forward, because staying stuck only, the wheels keep turning and turning and turning and turning, and we're miserable. And so, but I do wonder, Marilyn, I mean, again, even though you went to find that inner strength, because I want our viewers to be clear that just because we have this sacred presence and just because we find the inner strength doesn't mean that it doesn't get daunting for us and that we get sad and overwhelmed and want to scream and shout and do all those things. So I just want people to be aware that as you're going through it, it's not a bed of roses. Honestly.
No, oh no, it's very painful.
But that's pain. The pain is a part of the process, but you get through it.
Oh man, do you ever get through it? However, you can't do it alone.
Exactly.
I could not do it alone. My first marriage, when I realized that this was just not a good environment to raise our children in, because we just did not get along. Everybody needs a thinking place, and I think, isn't it Winnie the Pooh who has his somebody had a thinking place. And we all need a place where we can be alone, to think clearly, to work things out, to have a crying spell, not worry about somebody seeing. I had a place I lived in Rochester, New York, and I had a place overlooking the lake that I would drive to. And I'd sit there and I'd bang on the car, and I'd scream and I'd shout and I'd cry. And then I go, oh, I feel so much better. Yeah. But I also prayed a lot. Yeah. And I knew someone, actually he was a friend and a client. Most of my clients become friends.
That's because you're such a wonderful person. They can't help but to become friends.
It just works out that way. And he was a psychologist. Okay, so he would give me advice and we'd sit and talk. Because
I have to tell you, as a psychologist, I know you see pastologists up there, but I'm a psychologist and a pastor. And I'll tell you, you people that are friends just love to get free service, don't you?
Yes.
Free therapy.
But you know what? With me, it could be both ways. We could sit over coffee and I give marketing advice and then I get psychological advice. Hey, it works.
All right.
It works
it's a
out
win-win
fine.
situation.
We just don't have to worry about the paperwork.
Okay, sorry. So back to your story. Your friend who's a psychologist was able to help you.
Yes, and it was his idea, let's go sit over coffee.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to help. Because he knew who I was. And he actually knew my situation before even I would admit it to myself, because my office was down the hall from his in the same building. So he would see my ex-husband, I love to say ex-husband, my big life mistake. But you know what? And something I've got to say here is I would not be the person that I am today if I did not have obstacles and trials of fire in my life. And if I did not start over, I'd be dead, of course. I'd be dead.
So Marilyn, I want to just say something about that point, because sometimes that sends people into a tizzy when folks say you have to have had the life experiences that you have and blah, 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 blah. And I want to be clear about something. We don't have to have all the life experiences we have. There are terrible things that happen to us in life. But what I think you are saying in that statement is that you grew from that life experience and it's helped to shape you for better or worse into the person that you, for better, not worse, but I use that phrase, but it's helped to shape you into who you are, because I just want to be sensitive to that idea. I know that people really get upset when they say, well, you had to have gone through the experience that you went through. You were meant to, you were destined to. And I want to be clear about that, because there are circumstances in life that really is just because people are up to no good that things happen.
Yes.
But I do think that even when we are in the most horrific of circumstances, because I've heard people talk about it too much, that we can bring something good out of those if we view ourselves in a different way and we decide to change, even if it's being an advocate for someone else. Like, I know that you are a really big advocate, and so I appreciate you saying that you grew a lot from that experience.
And thank you for saying it so well. and she does that very well, too. It's true. I grew. Because we all have, as I said before, we all have obstacles in life. The key is to recognize each obstacle and decide what we want to do about it and make as right a decision as we can. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes you go, whoa, getting rid of that one, quick. But every change in life is a growth, a pattern of growth in our life's journey.
Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes what happens is people see themselves in a box and they don't think they can get out of that box. They don't see any way out of it. And what I think is interesting is sharing our stories. Because often as women, you said your psychologist friend knew your situation even before you did. Mm-hmm. And so there are 2 points I want to make about that. One is, and you can probably talk about this more too, when you share your story, there's a freedom that opens up because you're not hiding in fear, guilt, or shame, because we're ashamed to say that our intimate partners abused us, right?
Yeah.
And so sharing that story frees us. That's the first thing I want to say. You can talk about that a bit. But the second thing I wanted to just note too, if you could talk about this a little bit, is how people on the outside can notice things. And we have these blinders on. And I think it's so important for us to not be blind, because then we can look at the patterns. Why do I choose a certain type of person in my life? And by patterns, it could be we choose to be in relationships with partners who treat us in ways that are not healthy and kind to us. We choose to be in work relationships where our bosses are abusive sometimes, right?
Yes.
They're more verbally abusive. We allow our children to be verbally abusive. So I want you to kind of think a little bit about, so I know I'm requiring you to do a couple of things here at one time, but just to think a little bit about maybe what are some of your patterns? What are some of the things that you noticed about your 2 husbands in terms of similarities? Because that's the way we choose different people when we get married again, because you might get married again. I don't know.
No way.
No way she'll get married again. But how do we go about choosing differently? How do we break those patterns?
We break those patterns by recognizing what it is in ourselves that leads us to look for this type of person. And it's really looking deep inside ourselves, the good and the bad, because we sometimes don't know ourselves as well as we think. And if somebody says, something weird's going on, what's going on there, you've got to stop and say, what do you mean? Sure. Be open to, don't take it as, don't become defenseless or defensive, and don't think you're being criticized. You're not being criticized. The situation is being opened up for conversation to see, what do you see that I don't see?
Sure.
And listen to what they say, because you may be in a situation that could lead to ending your life or your children's lives. And I see today differently than I saw when I was young, because there seem to be so much more stresses in life. Both parents have to work, which means what we used to look at as the family unit has changed, because you don't have the time to devote to your children, and our children are our future. We've got to do what's best for them, not always what's best for us or what we think is best. Think of them first, and then guess what? It's better for you too in the long run.
In the long run, right?
It's just kind of, you're going in the back door, that's all.
No, no, of course, I have to jump in here again,
Of course
too,
you
because
do.
I want to make sure, because one of the things that I teach women to do is to take time for themselves. So even though we think of our children first for most of our circumstances, we have to pull back and take that time for ourselves, because I know some people who completely live for their children and they don't even worry about making themselves happy, and I think that's a mistake, because
Yes.
if mama is not happy, then the children aren't going to be happy either. So you have to take that time to have that quiet space to do the things that make you happy as well.
Everybody needs that. I look at my daughter, who is super mom, and I'm hoping that I was a good mom. Both of my kids are great kids. They're all grown up with, families of their own. But I see good things in my daughter, who is a super mom, and she's a super great wife. But she doesn't get time for herself. And every once in a while I hear that, I never have time to
I think
even
she
read a
I think she
book.
needs to come and see me. That's what she needs to do, because I would tell her she needs to spend some time
Well,
with
you know
herself.
what I do? I say, okay, next week or the week after, how about a full day for yourself? I'll take care of everything. I'll take care of the kids, I'll run them around, I'll make dinner, I'll do the laundry.
Do you want to come to my house?
So I call it the Christina Day, because her name is Christina, and she's wonderful. And I get her these gift certificates, for a massage or things like that, for her birthday and Christmas, and they sit on the shelf for sometimes up to a year. And I'm always bugging her. I say, honey, when are you going to use that gift certificate? I never have time. I say, okay, here we go, Christina Day. When do you want it?
Yeah.
And I change my schedule, because you know what? It's a good day for me too. Because it takes me out of my normal and it makes me feel good.
But I think
You know?
what you're also talking about, this is the shared relationships that we have with
Yeah.
people. And I think you are able to do that for your daughter because of what you experienced. You remember what it was like to work really hard, because I'm sure when you were building yourself back up, when you were starting over, there were times that you didn't have any time for yourself. Other than when you were going out to go have your cry or to talk with your psychologist friend, you probably didn't have many spa days. And so what you're saying is that, from my experience, I am able to share my goodness, my beautiful divine self. I'm able to give of that to other people and to my grandchildren. What joy is that, right?
Fantastic.
Yeah. And so I really appreciate what you've shared with us today about your starting over. There was so much more that we could have really talked about. I do want to just say, though, before before I close with some golden rules in a little bit, tell me though about the freedom in sharing your story, because I'd asked you about that before. Tell me about that a little bit, and how it released you.
Oh, man. I felt guilty. I felt like a failure. When I had those quiet moments with myself and with God and the universe, and I'm trying to realize that I'm special, and tell myself I'm special. It took a long time before I could admit that I really screwed up. But you know what? I'm a human being. We all goof up. And if somebody can learn from that, but it took years before I could. The only time I talked about it, when it was happening and right after it happened, was when I realized my first husband could take my children away, and I wanted him to know the situation. So I asked him to come over and sit and talk, and he goes, "What? You want to sit and talk?" I said, "Yeah. It's really, really important. It's about the kids." "Oh, well, okay." So I apologized to him for putting our children in a dangerous situation. And I promised him that it would never happen again, that it was a huge learning situation for me. And he just sat there, and our relationship changed, because all of a sudden I was a human being sitting across from him.
Sure.
And I was apologizing to him, I mean, it was a big thing. But could I talk about it to other people? No. no. But, you know, I'm turning 70 in a month. What the hell?
So you can talk about anything.
I can talk
yeah.
about anything. And things don't scare me. The only things that scare me are watching my daughter in a bad situation, or my grandkids, or my son in a, you know, tough situation.
But here's the tough part about that, right? And if we can think back to those situations where we wouldn't listen, sometimes people just have to have those hard experiences. You know, my mother used to say, and I'm sure my sisters will kill me for saying this, but my mother used to say, a hard head makes a soft behind. Like, there are going to be some consequences for this if you decide to do this. And so sometimes people are trying to guide us in the right way, but we're just intent on doing things the way we want. Or sometimes life is just difficult, and it takes us a moment to get out of those situations. But if we continue to think about, I have options, then we can move forward. But as long as we stay in that place of, no, I don't have options, this is the best that I can do. And I work with people who feel like I can't do any better. But it's really about feeling better about themselves. So,
but if you can remind them, like every once in a while I look at my daughter and say, I am so proud of you. And I'm proud of who you are as a person. I'm proud of the mother that you are to your children. And I just want to make sure that you know that I'm here for you, whatever you need. You know, that's really important that she hear that a lot.
Or and it will resonate with her,
Yeah.
even if she doesn't use you as much as, you know, she could. She knows when the chips are down, and that's really important in our shared relationships. I do want to just give some golden rules, just in terms of thinking about how do we get through these life experiences, and what are some things that will help us. And as we've talked today, we've really talked about our sacred relationships, our selfish relationships, and our shared relationships. So some of the golden rules of sacred intelligence that I want to leave people with, and if you want to jump in at any time, you can. I think it's really important when we are going through difficult situations to remove ourselves from the noise of friends and family and other folks who want to get in our ears, just chat, and they don't even know what's going on. And so you mentioned that. You said, I used to go and sit in my quiet space. And that's, to me, is the sacred place, wherever your quiet place is. So you want to find that place where you can nurture that sacred relationship. And it's okay to cry with the sacred as well. And you mentioned praying. Praying is very important for some people. Whatever you do that centers you and that keeps you grounded is what you need to do. Pay attention to your gut feeling about things, because to me that is that sacred piece. I had someone to say to me, my spidey senses went off about this person. And I said, well, then you need to pay attention to what your spidey senses are saying, because for me, that's the sacred saying to you, don't think that's a good thing for that person to say or do. And then what is the sacred saying to you in terms of starting over? Because is now time to start over, or do I need to do as you said and plan it out? But I want us to know, if you're ever in a dangerous situation, this long-term planning just does not work. But in other instances, you really need to wait for that appropriate time for you to move forward to the next thing. Because if you're in a situation where you're not being abused, for instance, but you're in an unhappy situation and financially things are just in dire straits, you might have to wait until you put away some money to move. It all depends on what your situation is. And then the selfish relationship is about believing in yourself. And you said, I had to find me. You see, I wrote all these rules and didn't even know that what you were going to say today with some of this, but you're speaking right into it. But thinking also beyond the problem. Don't just look at the problem and say it's a problem, but look at the possibilities, not the limitations. I think we have to do that. And to reframe our negative thinking, I spoke about that in our last episode, but we really almost have to record over those negative messages that we've gotten. We have to just say positive things about ourselves. And you said this earlier too, about having a clear mind to think. I always tell people, if you can, Don't respond when you're in a high emotional state, because we know that when we respond based on those emotions, good or bad, sometimes they can get us in trouble when we're just going with the feeling of things, right?
Right.
You know, a lot of things happen, and I won't say what those things are, but we cannot just respond based on emotions, because it also can, things can go sour. One of the things that my clients will sometimes face is that when they're involved in domestic disputes, they get into trouble because they haven't taken the necessary steps. And then remember the strengths and the tools that you've used before to help you get through. And I just want to say, for shared relationships, you mention them a lot. Talk to people, tell them your story. They can provide you with help, accept help from them, and then surround yourself with wise counsel, because you can't tell everybody your business, can you?
No, you can't.
Because some people won't know what to do with that. And then just be open to new relationships. We're out of time, so we don't have time to hear about whether you had other relationships after that. But be open to what new relationships will come up for you. As I do prepare to close, I do want to make an announcement. If you are involved in a situation that is physically or verbally or emotionally abusive and you need help, you can call the Domestic Violence Hotline. The number is 1-800-799-SAFE, 1-800-799-7233. Or visit their website at hotline.org, and you will find out valuable information in terms of getting help for you and how to help other people. Be sure to tune in to our next show, which comes on Thursdays. Actually, Marilyn and I switch time with each other. Thursday nights at 6 o'clock will be our next show. If you want more information, contact me at info@sacredintelligence.com. And if you want to get in touch with Marilyn, how can they get in touch with you?
860-389-2521. Give me a call, 860-389-2521.
And we hope we'll see you on YouTube really soon. But if you'd like to see the show, just go to my YouTube channel, Sacred Intelligence, and our next episode will be there. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll enjoy the rest of your week. Bye now.